Hello. So let's talk about leaving feeling absolutely impossible, right? And I think that what I hear as a coach is that people feel like they're weak. They feel like they can't leave and they just love the person way too much. But the truth is it's not because you're weak, it's because you're trauma bonded. You're not confused. You've been manipulated into staying. Now, something really interesting about trauma bonds that I don't hear a lot of people talk about is that it actually mimics love, but it's rooted in fear and survival. So it's not love. You're addicted to the pattern. You're not addicted to the person. And if this sounds familiar to you, I want you to hit subscribe, follow my channel because I create content every week to help you understand abusive relationships, why you feel stuck, and more specifically, how to heal and rebuild. So if you're new here, my name is Lisa Sonni, and I'm the founder of Stronger Than Before Coaching. And I'm an expert in breaking and healing from trauma bonds. I'm also an author and a content creator across all social media platforms under Stronger Than Before. So let's talk about these horrible trauma bonds that keep us stuck. I'm describing how they're not actually weakness, but they're really about survival. And the truth is, most people don't understand why victims go back or why they stay. And frankly, even you might not fully understand it yet. So today I want to walk you through 12 really core truths that are so important that can help you kind of unhook from the emotional traps, not just the person, but also the person. And by the end, I want you to have this kind of 12-step roadmap to start breaking free. So let's start with one of the very first things that you absolutely need, which is to understand the trauma bond, right? It's a survival response and it forms when abuse is mixed with intermittent rewards. So if you've ever heard of intermittent reinforcement or intermittent positive reinforcement, that's what's happening. And it's when an abuser is kind to you sometimes and abusive towards you sometimes, and you really never know. It's delivered intermittently. If you could know that it was every Friday, you'd avoid it, but it's intermittent. You never know when it's coming. The triggers are just completely unknown to you. And you really do become addicted to the cycle, which is really idealization, devaluation, crumbs of hope, and you just go in a circle. Now, your nervous system actually bonds to the pattern, right? Not just the person. It's actually chemical. It's not just emotional. And I think a lot of people get that wrong. So you've got dopamine and cortisol just rushing through you. It's psychological. It's not just emotional. So awareness is actually the first kind of crack in this illusion of love. Now you might feel like, oh, I love the person, or I love the person and I'm trauma bonded, but they don't really coexist. I have a belief that you love the person that you thought they were, the person that they show you that they are sometimes, but that's not really fundamentally who they are. So that's the first one. The second one I call living in reality, because the truth is we're living in their reality or even a dual reality, which can be really complicated. So cognitive dissonance is really the focus here. And you may have heard that word going around or that phrase. And I remember years ago when I first heard that, I was like, oh, it felt like too clinical for me to understand. But the truth is, cognitive dissonance is just when your brain is holding two opposing truths at once. And so it can happen in many different ways, but in the context of an abusive relationship, it would be like, he loves me and he hurts me. He is the pain and the comfort. He is the knife and the band-aid. It doesn't make sense, right? So in abuse, the dissonance is pretty constant and fundamentally it paralyzes you. Now, something that was really interesting is that Dr. Peter Salerno actually calls it traumatic cognitive dissonance. This is a deeper, more chronic form of dissonance that's caused by prolonged exposure to betrayal and manipulation and fear. So you start to question yourself instead of the abuser. And that feels really confusing when you're in it. But the truth is that naming this and calling it cognitive dissonance or traumatic cognitive dissonance can really help you stop trying to make sense of the chaos and instead just see it for exactly what it is, which is intentional harm. The next step is letting go of their potential, right? We're talking about feeling like you love the person that you met, the person that you know that they can be deep down. They're going through something, all of the things you're telling yourself. But the truth is that you weren't in love with the real person. You were in love with who they pretended to be. And in this case, I think hope can be really dangerous because it keeps you attached or tethered to this fantasy. They could change, and that's the trap. Maybe they'll change. He says he's going to change. He's doing some things that seem like change. He hasn't been particularly awful in the last week or month. Maybe that's really change. I've left him before. This time feels different, but I want you to start grieving the idea of them, because your healing actually really starts to begin when you choose truth over hope. Hope is very painful when it's in the context of an abusive relationship. It's not rooted in reality at all. The next step, step 4, is take it one day at a time. And I feel like that's kind of an AA thing, right? But you really want to break the cycle into these moments, because it's really hard sometimes to get through the day, often hard to get through an hour. And your mind flip flops constantly, stay, go. It makes sense. I'm definitely leaving. Oh my God, I can't leave. So you don't need to respond today. You don't need to decide right this minute. Detox is real. Trauma bonds are like an addiction. And so that feeling of like shaking and anxiety and rumination, those obsessive thoughts, it's so, so hard. The truth is, you're withdrawing from a relationship. You're not just withdrawing from a person, you're withdrawing from the cycle. You're withdrawing from all of these emotions and these chemicals running through your body. And I wish so much that healing was like a straight line and you could just end it and it gets better. That's not really how it works. But I also want to give you permission to stumble. This is hard. It's not always going to be easy, but I promise that you can do this with the right steps. So keep listening, because this really matters. I want you to let yourself feel it. This is where you're really going to look inward and stop focusing on what they're doing and why they're doing it. And we're going to shift this all into you. So maybe you feel rage or grief. I know there's a huge sense of injustice. There's loss, love, guilt. And honestly, all of those things can happen in one day, right? It's this massive roller coaster of feelings. And it's really hard because the anxiety is brutal. Whether you're in the relationship or already out, you can still be in a trauma bond. Getting out is very difficult when you're in one, but it's not impossible. And even when you're already out, it's like, okay, finally, I'm out. I can break this. But it's still really hard. So I just want to give you permission to accept that this is hard. I acknowledge that this is hard, and we're going to keep going. So I want to tell you that these feelings, all of these complicated feelings, it's actually proof that you're healing. Emotions don't mean that you have to go back, right? Even if you miss them, if you're already out, or even if you have this feeling of, I can't leave, that doesn't mean you're in the right place. This isn't a sign of, oh, see, this is like, I love him so much. Or, we always end up back together. There's this pull. It's just magnetic. I can't explain it. No, you can explain it. It's a trauma bond. And all of this just means that your body, your mind, your brain, it's all processing what's going on. So I want you to let the feelings kind of move through. Don't let them take root, because they're not real. I want safe outlets for you, like movement or voice notes to yourself, to your friends. Get into coaching, get into therapy, use grounding techniques, breathing techniques. Really learn how to regulate your emotions and sit in some of the anxiety, because I know that anxiety is like, oh, I just can't picture myself without them. And then you go back, or you creep their social media, or you answer their texts, or you just decide that it's too hard to leave. And it is hard. I'm never going to say that it's not hard, but you can do this. And I'm talking about the emotional stuff because I do realize there's a lot of external factors that also contribute to making this really, really hard. So step number 6, I call it show yourself compassion. People really struggle with this. And it's like, I'm stupid, or I'm weak, or I can't do this, or who would I be without him? Or will I be alone forever without him? But the truth is, you were manipulated. And I want you to not punish yourself for that. Some people have this sort of like, well, you picked him, lay in your bed, here you go. You don't have to be punished forever because an abusive person conned you or lied to you and pretended to be someone that they're not. You're allowed to fix this. You're allowed to choose differently. You're allowed to leave. You don't need a reason. But if you're watching this video, you probably have a very good reason. Staying doesn't make you stupid. It makes you trauma bonded. And a lot of people are like, only a stupid person would stay when they're being abused. I think we can all agree that often you don't know that you're being abused. You don't even recognize it. Sometimes even in the cases of physical abuse, I know I experienced that, where I was being physically abused and I didn't connect it to abuse. It seemed like they were all one-off instances, not to even connect the fact that it was a pattern. But a lot of people are experiencing emotional, psychological, financial abuse and being told that it's not abuse and they're being ridiculous. So it's really hard to see it. So just think about, What unmet need was this person filling, or what did I think they were filling? What was I getting out of this? People say nothing, but there's an illusion of something. And I want you to think about that and unpack it and just approach yourself with curiosity, not with judgment. And anybody else that approaches you with judgment can just go away. Replace judgment with understanding and know that self forgiveness rather is so important to breaking free. You need that. And forgiving yourself is very hard and a whole separate topic, but you don't need to forgive them. You just need to forgive yourself. The next one, number 7, is grieving the loss. This is really hard because you're grieving someone that is still alive. And I know that we often see grief in the context of death, but this is a death. This absolutely is. It's a death of a dream. It's a death of who you thought they were, a death of the version of you that believed that this person was good, that the world was good, that people aren't evil, that people aren't out to get you. There is so much grief. Allow yourself this whole, like, finally you're leaving, you're making the decision to leave, or you got left, but it's an abusive person. You're supposed to be happy. Who says? Grief is normal and it's not weakness. I actually think it's a huge part of the detox. It's necessary, but you can grieve them and you can miss them and you can still leave them. It's kind of like empathy without obligation. You can feel bad for them and you're still not obligated to stay, right? I want you to let go of the need for closure from them because that can really hinder grief, being able to process the grief. You don't need an apology from them. You don't need an admission from them. You were there. You know what happened. You can trust your own experience and you don't need closure from them. Number 8 is what I call clarifying the acceptable and unacceptable behaviors that were happening in that relationship. This is kind of like boundaries, but it's not just about boundaries because I think what people get wrong about them is they set boundaries. Like if he calls me another name, I'm leaving. Are you going to leave? And there's no judgment. I mean, it's easy to say, I would leave if anybody called me, but are you ready to leave yet? Because if you're not, then maybe you exit the conversation or stop the text messaging or leave the room or, and I mean, I know they can chase you and follow you. Sometimes I get it, but you're doing your best to set that boundary of I'm not going to put up with that until you can set the boundary of if he does this, then I'll leave. You can up the consequences as you get stronger. So it's kind of baby steps. But where you want to start is you have kind of normalized the abuse unconsciously, but you've normalized it. It's how we survive in these relationships, right? It's not that bad. And he was just angry and all the things we tell ourselves and all the things that they tell us to help us rationalize it. But I want you to make a list of the things that you tolerated that in hindsight, you wish you hadn't tolerated that really would be a boundary in a future relationship, frankly, with anyone, but certainly a romantic partnership. Ask yourself, if my best friend told me that they were going through this and these things were happening to them, what would they say? So, or what would you tell them? Make clear to yourself what your non-negotiables are moving forward. And I just want you to sort of redefine what self-love looks like because we accept this sort of love that hurts and love that yells and painful experiences as survival through this relationship because often leaving can feel worse than staying. I don't think that that's true in the end, but I get that it feels that way. So it's okay if, you know, it feels boring to be in a healthy relationship. It's okay because we can get through that. But I want you to just sort of think about how you want to be treated and what this could look like. What are the unacceptable things that really have bothered you? They've really hurt you. And just kind of start there and look at how you want to be treated and how you don't want to be treated. You don't even have to take action quite yet. Just make this list, process this. Number 9, and I've touched on this a little bit, is your unmet needs. You have to understand that. I did a group coaching program yesterday on this exact topic, and we were talking about what did they give you that felt good? And was it attention, purpose, validation? You felt seen, you felt chosen. What were the things when you were being love bombed, when things were good, or even when things oscillate between good and bad? These needs are very real, they're very human, but they were filled in a very manipulative and harmful way. And you need to recognize that. So I want you to explore the roots of those needs. It often comes from childhood, not always, but often. Just kind of what the goal here is to learn how to meet them yourself. We always need people, of course, and we want people in our lives, but If you don't need validation from anyone else, you're less likely to fall into a trap like that. Or if you don't need people to choose you because you choose you. So that's something really good to explore. You don't need pain to feel connected. You can meet your own needs safely and without the chaos, because tell me that's not the goal. The chaos of these abusive relationships is absolutely brutal. So, step 10 is visualize a peaceful life. Because people who are abusive, narcissistic, they really thrive in chaos, right? It's all about driving up the chaos, driving up the emotions. They want you to be dysregulated. So, I want you to start dreaming again. Imagine waking up and you don't feel dread. You don't feel like you're on eggshells. You're not walking through the kitchen like, "Oh, I wonder how they're in mood today." Or if you have an issue and you want to bring it up, it's like, oh, when should I bring this up? Because we all know it's never the right time, right? Can you imagine a calm life without this dramatic intensity? You're grounded. Imagine. So just picture this life because you want to visualize this without them. Build a life that does not include them. What are all the dreams that you want? You don't have to start taking action again. This is just thinking and dreaming for now. Your nervous system is definitely going to need time to adjust and get there. And these are some grounding techniques and breath work and things like that, journaling, expressing yourself, because grounding techniques and breath work, they're not for everybody. Exercise, walking in nature. Like, there's so many things that you can do that will just help you regulate, help you visualize. You can create vision boards. There's tons of ideas. Step 11 is building a support system. This is always a really interesting topic because some people have a good support system. Some people have a terrible support system. Some people don't have a support system at all. So you need people who understand trauma, not just people who are like, move on, leave him. What's wrong with you? I would have left, or I don't know why you stay. All of the things that people say, even the helpful things, helpful, even the things that they think they're being helpful, but they're fundamentally not. So if you need a support system, I actually have a private community called the Toxic Free Relationship Club that you can join. The link is in the description. But the truth is, listen, validation is medicine. So find your community, validate your experience with healthy, supportive people while you work on self-validation, which is the ultimate goal. But I want you to do something. Say this out loud. This is abuse, or this was abuse. Say it. This is abuse, because people are going to deny that. People are going to deny that constantly. You're denying it to yourself often, right? But this is abuse. That's so important to validate yourself. And there is a real power in being witnessed. So if you're looking for a support system, you can join the club or talk to the people in your life. So it's important to build a support system. And it's nice to have people online, but it's also nice to have people in real life. So that's something that we could work on together and I can talk to you about more. But the truth is, you're not alone. There's tons of people that have gone through these abusive relationships and have struggled or are struggling to get themselves out. This leads me into the last point, number 12, the hardest, undoubtedly, rebuilding your self-love and rebuilding your confidence. You didn't lose your worth. I think, if anything, you just stopped seeing your worth. So you need to reconnect to that. You can't actually hate yourself into healing. And I used to do this. I would look at myself in the mirror and be like, you're so stupid. What is wrong with you? That is the worst thing you can do. Don't do that. You need to tell yourself that this is hard and you're making progress. This is really, the anxiety is debilitating, but I made it through today, and tomorrow is a different day and I'm going to try again. You know, this whole stronger than before, my screen name, you will be stronger than you were yesterday. You just need to be that much better. And some days you'll go back, you'll regress. That's okay, because whatever kicked you in that direction, that is something you're going to use to learn what got you in that direction. And you're going to learn what you need to further support yourself in moving forward. Confidence really comes from keeping your word to yourself. And that's really hard because, you know, you said you were going to leave and you stayed, and this doesn't build confidence. This makes you feel like you're weak and stupid for staying when you're not. This is a trauma bond. This is beyond you just making a logical decision. You can't actually logic your way out of an abusive relationship. And so many people try, right? It seems so clear, so obvious, but I just want to really reiterate, it's not. It is not. So rebuild your identity brick by brick. A lot of people don't know who they are when they come out of an abusive relationship, because the truth is you've been living for that person for however long, right? Years, months, weeks, years, decades. You have been dealing with this and trained, groomed, conditioned to live for another person. So that's not helpful. That's in no way is that helpful to you. So rebuilding your self-love and confidence, I think it's one of the longest steps. And the truth is, I don't know if there's an end point. You're doing that forever, but it's beautiful. I used to think that I would watch these people online talking about self-love and confidence, and I was always kind of like, I bet you they go home and cry into their pillows. I bet you this isn't true. But the truth is, it is true that you can really love yourself. So if you've never had it, you can build it. If you had it before the relationship and it was kind of destroyed in the relationship, you can build it. You can always rebuild. And it's hard. Everything I've said is hard, but we're going to do it hard. I've always loved that expression. Just do it hard. So if you've been nodding through this, if you're in agreement, if you're feeling these things, if you're finally feeling like someone gets it, I'm saying all the things that you have been feeling, then I feel like you're ready to break free, and this is your moment. So I'm actually co-hosting a group coaching program with Dr. Peter Salerno, who is an amazing therapist who's written some phenomenal books, Traumatic Cognitive Dissonance and the Nature and Nurture of Narcissism. And we're hosting the Trauma Bond Recovery Group Coaching Program. The next cohort starts on April 24th, and it's 12 weeks, real tools, deep validation, trauma-informed support. We want to teach you how to understand the bond, how to detach safely, and more importantly, how to rebuild and just reclaim your power. The sessions are live, they're weekly. It's only 8 people. So please go to the link in this video and check out this program. And thank you so much to everybody for being here today and listening. And I appreciate all the comments. I'm just going to go through some of these comments and respond. But thank you so much for watching. Let's see here. So, well, thank you for speaking on this. Key, yeah. And I've never thought of it this way. That's amazing. I'm so glad, because people feel that way, like, what's wrong with me? And this is so hard, and I can't do this. And I love the person so much. It's not love. And I've experienced some people feeling like that's a very invalidating statement to say, that you don't love the person when you feel like you do, but you love the version of them that they showed you, but that's not who they are. We know, right? The narcissistic mask. And frankly, everything I've said, you don't necessarily only get trauma bonded to an abuser, or sorry, to a narcissist rather. It can be in any abusive relationship. And while I speak about romantic partnerships, that's also not always the case. You can be trauma bonded to friends, family, a boss, a romantic partner. It's anything. What do I think of radical acceptance? I mean, I think of radical acceptance in the concept of, you're radically accepting that this is who they are, that they're not going to change, and that you need to leave. And I hope that's what you meant. But I think it's important to accept that that's who they are, and not try to change somebody, particularly somebody who doesn't want to change. I think that's even more important. They don't want to change. They're not interested in change, especially if they're a clinical narcissist. Again, I don't care if they're diagnosed, because they don't get diagnosed. But the truth is, even the sort of spectrum of narcissism, they don't want to change. So staying and hoping that they change, how long are you going to stay? How long will you be stuck? And I always want people to understand that, like, every day is just one more day that you're stuck. One of these days, you need to do something different. Maybe that's registering for the group coaching program. Maybe that's taking my self-paced, self-guided course, which is less expensive, but not as, well, it's not as personal, obviously. You really get to talk through this and have extra support in the live group coaching. But is it learning and listening to the 12 steps I just gave you and really creating a plan for yourself? Is it building the support system? Like, where are the vulnerabilities in how to heal? What's making this hard for you? Curiosity without judgment, right? It's really important. I left 6 months ago. Yes. Somebody said, I really needed this today, and this is where I'm at. I love your content. Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Well, I hope that you join us in our upcoming group coaching program. Never tell someone that you're leaving. It's dangerous. I agree with that. I personally, if you are able, I'm a firm believer in just disappear. I get it. You're like, well, we're married, but we have kids. But I know there's logistics to plan, and this video is not about that. But if you can avoid telling them in advance, I would avoid telling them in advance. Absolutely. Yeah. It's been hard to leave because he's nice and then mean. That oscillation between kindness and mean, oh my goodness. It's like every time you go to leave, they're kind or not as abusive. Sometimes kind, sometimes they're just not particularly awful. But that's the cycle. And that's the part that people don't get. Like, no, you don't understand. He's not always bad. He's not always abusive. Yes, I do understand because that is exactly how it works. And I want to leave you with this. The good times exist to facilitate the bad. That's why they're there. You think that's like sometimes he's nice and sometimes he's mean. Sometimes he's pretending to be nice to keep you because you stay. It makes you stay. It makes all of us stay. That's what makes it so hard. It's almost like that's necessary. It's almost like that's an abuse tactic. Positive intermittent reinforcement is an abuse tactic. I remember making a video on this once, and all the men were very upset because they were like, oh, now being kind is abusive. No, being kind is not abusive. Being kind and abusive makes the kindness abusive because it's part of the cycle. So I know that's a little confusing to get, but it's not really that complicated if you're not in an abusive relationship. When you're in it, it's very complicated. I get that. It's a choice between old and poor and alone versus being married to the narcissist. That's a tough choice. And people are always like, leave, leave. There are people who cannot leave or cannot leave right now. And not a lot of people talk about that. I don't even think I talk about it often enough, but it is very true. You know, kids and money and fear of being physically harmed. There's tons of reasons that people stay. So give yourself that grace. But if you are in a trauma bond, I want you to accept that and know I'm in a trauma bond. This is not love. And I'm going to take the steps. Now, the emotional steps and the logistical steps of leaving, whether that's money, family, court, all kinds of things that make it impossible to physically leave. But trauma bonds are emotional and psychological bonds that keep you. So I work with people on the emotional things that really keep you stuck, such as trauma bonding, but also grief and guilt. Tell me we don't all feel really guilty when we're leaving. So all of these things are part of a trauma bond. So if you are in a trauma bond, please, please look into signing up for this. I also have a free quiz called Am I Trauma Bonded? It takes 2 minutes and you get instant results. If you're not sure if you're stuck in one, you can take that quiz and find out. But I just want to invite everyone who is feeling like you are stuck in a trauma bond, whether you're in the relationship or you're already out, but you're actively trauma bonded, please look into the Trauma Bond Recovery Group Coaching Program with myself and Dr. Peter Salerno. The next cohort starts on April 24th and it's 12 weeks. So check it out. We would love to have you there and help you along in your healing. So thank you so much to everybody for being here, and I will see you next time.